Okay, I thought this would be interesting to make a video about this. Okay, so we have the Kiersgaard amphibious assault ship, and then we have the Abraham Lincoln strike group, and there was a Spanish warship that was with them with the NATO mission, which is now heading towards India. They broke off a few days ago because going to the Persian Gulf was not a part of their mission directive. So we also have bombers that are being sent over there to the UAE, which is where the majority of our Air Force has been fighting ISIS. They've been based out of there, along with the Canadians and a few others. There's almost no information about the locations of those things. You know, it's very difficult to hide an aircraft carrier, so, you know, it makes sense that this information is public, but, you know, it's kind of construed. And this is outdated, too. It's the 21st right now, and the aircraft carrier has already entered the Persian Gulf. So, this is already inaccurate as of me making this, but this is just to give you an idea. So, this is a map of the general Middle East region. This is Iran in green, and this is Saudi Arabia in red. Now, this is just based off of things that I've been looking at in terms of tensions, relations, and intelligence sharing. Okay, now blue is Israel because Israel obviously plays a factor in this. I can't show you the U.S. military stuff because only the U.S. military knows that, and that's classified, and there's no way that anyone could get a hold of that. But we do have troops in Afghanistan, we have troops in Turkey, we have training operations with Israel and Jordan. As I just said, we have forces right now in the UAE. We have a small military presence in Syria, etc., etc. Now, the squares represent relations. Now, this is only going by countries in the region, because if we went internationally, that's ridiculous. You know, you could just go Google that for yourself. Now, the green squares represents close diplomatic ties to Iran. Red means close diplomatic ties to Saudi Arabia, and blue means close diplomatic ties to Israel. Now, Egypt is an interesting country because, you know, the peace accords and, you know, when they got the Sinai back and all that, they are basically neutral towards Israel, but they do cooperate with them. Now, about 2 years ago, Israel and Saudi Arabia started sharing intelligence. That's what those squiggles mean with the circles they're attached to them, is to represent that. Israel has very poor relations with almost every country in the region, but it has slightly improved. Saudi Arabia and Egypt are cooperating with Israel, same thing with Jordan, more so than they have in a long time, because of their common threat being Iran. Turkey is very, very interesting because they have relations with Saudi Arabia and Iran that are good, but at the same time, they don't like them. They have good relations with Russia, but they've clashed in the past. Turkey has shot down Russian aircraft in the past. They've killed Russian personnel in the past. They've come to blows in the past. But at the same time, Russia has helped them with their atomic energy program, which is funny because the United States does not have a problem with Turkey doing that, but Iran, you know, that's bad apparently. But you know, is Iran getting a nuclear weapon? I don't know. But they are increasing their uranium enrichment, which Trump has threatened if they do that, the United States will attack them. Which is interesting because that's not in violation of the IRGC, which is the Iranian nuclear agreement. There's civil wars in Yemen and Syria, and Iraq is still very unstable after fighting ISIS, the U.S. occupation, the sanctions that the U.S. put on Iraq during Clinton, etc. And they're still rebuilding, and basically Kurdistan, although it is a semi-autonomous part of Iraq, so is Assyria, which is mostly over here in western Iraq. Now, these circles here that are in red, those are countries that have military alliances. That's Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and that's also the UAE. Yemen is complicated. They're allowing Saudi Arabia to intervene on their behalf, but there is no formal document that says we are allies. But it is safe to say that basically they are in alignment with Saudi Arabia. And Syria is interesting because there's Saudi proxies there in Idlib, which is along the border between Syria and Turkey. And that's basically a demilitarized zone. It's kind of complicated what's going on there. The Russians are administering it, and so is Turkey. But the place is basically controlled by Al-Qaeda. It's controlled by their branch there, al-Nusra, which is sort of not really broken off from Al-Qaeda and sort of not really, you know, their own thing. It's kind of complicated. Nobody can really agree if they're Al-Qaeda or if they've broken off. Nobody can agree on that. I don't know. They're terrorists. That's all we need to know. Iran has troops there. They have military bases there. Same thing with Lebanon. Hezbollah is primarily backed by Iran and trained and equipped by Iran. Syria has Russian troops based there, which have been there since the 1970s. And since October of 2015, Russia intervened to assist Syria to fight against ISIS and all the other different terrorists there and proxies. Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes over the years, including indirect covert military action and special forces operations against a combination of Iran and Syria, and also Hezbollah. Israel has almost invaded Lebanon a couple of times the last few years. There are increasing numbers of rocket attacks against Israel from Gaza, which are also indirectly being supplied by Hezbollah and also Iran. Iran is also supplying the Houthis, which are over here in Yemen. They have even shot long-range ballistic missiles into Saudi Arabia, which have been shot down by Patriot missiles supplied by the United States. Now, some of these missiles have made it through, and they've hit various targets. Recently, there were Houthi rebels that flew drones out of parts of Yemen and tried to attack an oil pipeline that was in Saudi Arabia. But that's speculation. Same thing with the oil tankers off the coast of Oman that were attacked by what would appear to be limpet mines. So I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, and then we have the rocket attack that was that hit the green zone. That's in Baghdad. Now, Iraq has very close relations with Iran, and Iran assisted them greatly, along with the United States, in fighting ISIS. But here's the thing. The Popular Mobilization Forces, the Shiite militias that are in Iraq, they are no longer listening to really anything the Iraqi government has to say. They have always been independent of the Iraqi government, but they're not even listening to their advice. The president of Iraq was recently interviewed by CBS News, and he said that he feels that basically some of these groups might even be going rogue, which I have speculated the last week as well. If that's the case, they're not listening to Iran or Iraq, and that is very dangerous, because Trump would look at that and say, look, they're backed by Iran, we have to attack Iran, because for some reason he just seems to be just real fascinated with the military strike against Iran. Now, I think we can all agree that Iran is an asshole, and Saudi Arabia, both equally are assholes, and so is Israel. None of these countries are angels. None of these countries are paragons of human rights. Israel having a giant outdoor prison, which is the Gaza Strip, which they bomb and starve. And then we have Saudi Arabia, which is basically carrying out a genocide against the Yemeni people, which is the largest outbreak of cholera since the Second World War. Some might even argue during the Balkan War in the 90s, but actually it's World War II. Mostly what happened in the Soviet Union when the Germans invaded. There was a lot of cholera there, mostly in small cities and other things like that. Not to mention widespread cannibalism that was in places like Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. I'm not so sure about cannibalism in Yemen, but that would not surprise me given the fact that they are starving. Um, Saudi Arabia is blocking humanitarian aid to them. And then we have Iran, which is backing suicide bombers, uh, uh, cocaine. Believe it or not, cocaine. Them and Hezbollah are involved in drug smuggling into Latin America, mostly having to do with Guatemala and Colombia. Iran is also closely linked to North Korea. So, in terms of what's going to happen militarily, really the only thing the United States can do besides an all-out invasion, which is not on the table, that's speculation, the 120,000 troops. But what we have in place right now is it appears to be a gradual buildup, which the United States did before with Afghanistan and Iraq and also Libya. If this buildup continues to, well, build up, it is very possible that 120,000 troops will be deployed into Iraq, Afghanistan, or both to take out Iran. Now, that said, I don't know, but it looks pretty bad.